Welcome back, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're zooming in on just one day, July 31st, 2025. We've got a stack of sources you send over, and we're going to pull out the key insights. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding a really packed day, connecting the dots so you feel genuinely informed.
Exactly. And July 31st, it might seem random, but the events around that date, they really give us a snapshot of the big trends. We're talking economics, geopolitics, even science breakthroughs. Our job today is to unpack not just what was going on, but why it all matters.
Absolutely. Let's untangle some of those connections, maybe find a few surprises along the way. Okay, ready to dive into a very busy July 31st? Let's kick things off with a major economic headline. On that day, July 31st, President Trump announced some pretty significant new global tariffs. And they were set to kick in fast, right? August 7th.
Yeah, just a week later. And what's striking is, well, it's a clear continuation of that protectionist trade approach we've seen. These tariffs, they vary quite a bit, like 10% up to 50%, hitting 68 countries plus the whole EU.
Wow, 50% for some.
Yeah, Brazil's facing 50%, Canada 35%, South Korea 15%. It's a wide range. Interestingly, Mexico got a bit of breathing room, a 90-day negotiation window. And some others, like Taiwan, Cambodia, Japan, they'd actually already renegotiated rates beforehand.
Okay, so what are the immediate worries here, the ripple effects?
Well, you're looking at rising costs, obviously, for industries that rely on imports. That usually means higher prices for consumers. And it definitely adds fuel to inflation concerns. Plus, we're already seeing legal pushback. States like Oregon are challenging it, and figures in Congress like Senator Susan Collins are questioning the executive authority behind it.
Right. But how did the markets actually take this news? Because sometimes they react in unexpected ways.
That's the fascinating part. Despite this big tariff announcement hanging over everything, the financial markets on the 31st, they actually rallied. They responded really positively to strong Q2 earnings reports from the tech giants, Microsoft, Meta.
Ah, tech effect.
Exactly. Driven largely by all that investment in AI and, the continued boom in cloud services. Microsoft even topped a projected $4 trillion market cap. That's huge. And it pulled the S&P 500 and NASDAQ up with it.
So tech optimism basically outweighed the trade war fears, at least for that day.
It seems so. Which tells you something about where investors are placing their bets right now. But then, here's another layer. The Federal Reserve, they met on July 31st too, and they decided to hold interest rates steady, kept them at that 4.25, 4.5% range.
Even with political pressure, right? President Trump had been pushing for cuts.
Oh yeah, considerable pressure. But the Fed, under Jerome Powell, stayed cautious. They pointed to, well, persistent inflation and these very trade uncertainties we're talking about. Q2 GDP growth was okay, around 3%. Unemployment was still pretty strong at 4.1%.
So not enough reason to cut just yet, in their view.
Apparently not. There are a couple of dissents. Governors Waller and Bowman thought maybe it was time or soon would be. But Powell essentially kicked the can down the road, saying they'd wait for more data. All eyes are now on the Jackson Hole Symposium in August, that big central banker meeting. And interestingly, this Fed's stance, it also seemed to contribute to copper prices taking a nosedive. Bit of a warning signal there about broader economic health, maybe.
Okay, let's hop across the pond. The UK pound had a really rough July, didn't it?
It really did. Its worst month against the dollar in almost 2 years. Fell about 3.75%. It's a significant drop.
What was driving that?
It was kind of a perfect storm. You had ongoing worries about the UK's own economic fragility, inflation concerns there too, and just generally weaker investor confidence. And then you contrast the Fed holding firm here with growing expectations that the Bank of England might actually cut rates soon. Well, that put even more pressure on the pound.
But it wasn't all bad news for the London markets.
No, surprisingly, you had some really strong corporate earnings. Rolls-Royce, for instance, raised its profit forecast by a massive $400 million. Unilever also did well, and that actually boosted the FTSE 100 index to hit record highs during the day. So good company performance managed to offset some of those bigger economic headwinds, for a while at least.
And the economic turbulence wasn't just in finance. It hit the travel sector, too, on the 31st.
Yeah, 2 airlines actually ceased operations that day. Jetstar Asia, the budget carrier, and also Silver Airways, which is based in Florida.
Just stopped flying.
Pretty much.
Right?
The reasons cited were, well, the usual suspects in that industry. Shifting market dynamics, rising costs becoming unbearable, and just intense competition. It immediately impacts regional travel links, jobs, obviously, and leaves a lot of passengers scrambling with canceled flights. A tough situation.
Okay, so a complex economic picture. Now we have to shift focus, sadly, to some really urgent geopolitical issues. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, reports on July 31st, sounded particularly bleak.
They were truly dire. UNRWA, the main UN agency working there, basically described their whole aid operation as a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a doctor, a New Yorker just back from Gaza, confirming widespread starvation. That's a direct contradiction to what some Israeli officials had been saying.
And reports of casualties near aid areas.
Yeah, just horrific. Over 90 civilians reportedly killed near aid distribution points in a single day. Widespread malnutrition, especially among children, but even affecting medical staff. Humanitarian groups are just sounding the alarm constantly, warning that the continued aid blockades, the shortages of everything, food, water, medicine, could genuinely lead to a man-made famine on an unprecedented scale.
And this crisis is clearly causing waves back here in the U.S. politically.
Absolutely. On July 31st, there was a significant vote in the House. Over half the Democrats supported a resolution initially pushed by Senator Bernie Sanders to block a specific arms sale to Israel, about $675 million worth.
Did it pass?
No, it ultimately failed. The vote was 70 against, 27 for. But the fact that so many Democrats voted to block it, that's a really big deal. It signals this growing tension, this split within the Democratic Party over Middle East policy. Human rights groups praised the dissenters, of course. On the other side, Israeli officials and U.S. defense figures warned it could damage the strategic alliance. It definitely shows a growing unease within the party ranks.
And the UK government also took a notable step.
A very strong step, yes. Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced on the 31st that the UK plans to formally recognize Palestine as a state. But, and this is key, only if Israel doesn't agree to a new ceasefire. It's the most direct ultimatum we've seen from a major Western power.
That must have caused quite a stir.
Oh, absolutely. Big debates erupted in the British press. Large political rallies were held. U.S. State Department officials quickly tried to downplay the immediate implications, ease tensions, but it's a significant diplomatic move.
Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine continued with devastating attacks.
Tragically, yes. Kyiv suffered one of its deadliest attacks in months on July 31st. Russian missiles, drones, hitting residential areas, even a children's hospital. The death toll was over 30, including at least 5 kids. Just awful.
And this was part of a wider pattern.
It seemed so. Russia appeared to be really ramping up pressure on Ukrainian cities around that time. President Zelensky, naturally, vowed retaliation, and Western governments condemned it strongly, leading to renewed calls and debates about sending more advanced air defense systems to Ukraine.
Another ongoing crisis getting worse by the end of July was Sudan.
Yes, the civil war there just continues to grind on, devastating the region. Reports on the 31st talked about intensified fighting and efforts to essentially partition the country. The civilian death toll keeps climbing. Aid agencies were making fresh pleas for access, warning again about looming famine conditions, and the whole crisis is spilling over, destabilizing neighboring countries like Chad and South Sudan. It's a massive regional emergency.
Okay, let's shift focus to the Indo-Pacific. Tension's still high there. There was a big military exercise wrapping up.
Right, Exercise Talisman Sabre. It concluded just before the 31st on July 28th. And this year, it was the largest one ever held.
How big are we talking?
About 35,000 troops involved from 19 different countries. It's a real show of allied cooperation, clearly aimed at signaling unity in the face of China's growing assertiveness in the region. Papua New Guinea was involved for the first time, too, which is significant geographically.
And China's reaction?
Predictable. Chinese officials called the exercise provocative. The participating governments, particularly the U.S. and its allies, framed it purely as deterrence, necessary for maintaining stability.
And tied into that, the U.S. was moving forward with a new facility in the Philippines.
Yes, confirmation came in the last week of July about progress on a major ammunition storage hub at Subic Bay. The idea is to support regional defense partners, have supplies closer to potential flashpoints, again, primarily aimed at deterring Chinese maritime expansion. Though, interestingly, there was debate within the Philippines itself among lawmakers about the sovereignty implications of hosting such a facility.
Okay, and one domestic note on policy from the 31st immigration.
Yeah, CBS News released an analysis looking at ICE arrests under President Trump's second term. What it showed was a real concentration. Nearly a quarter, 25% of all ICE arrests happen in just one state, Texas. Florida and California were next, but Texas was way out in front.
And the reaction to that?
Well, it split along expected lines. Civil rights groups criticized the strategy, calling it overly focused and aggressive in certain areas. Supporters argued it was effective and improved border security.
All right, let's pivot now. From geopolitics to the planet itself and some science news, starting with a literal earthshaker off Kamchatka.
A big one, yes. An 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck off the Kamchatka Peninsula on July 31st. That immediately triggered tsunami alerts across the Pacific.
8.8 is massive. Was there major damage?
There was flooding in coastal areas near the epicenter, like Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, and very faint tsunami waves were actually detected as far away as Hawaii, Japan, and the U.S. West Coast. But the good news is, casualties were avoided. And that's largely credited to the international warning systems being effective and local communities having practiced drills.
That's fortunate, but there are some worries about those warning systems.
There are. Concerns surfaced around this time about potential funding cuts to the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, the PTWC. Some experts warn that cuts could really degrade readiness for the next big one.
And the weather closer to home was also extreme on the 31st. The U.S. Northeast got hit hard.
Yeah, a major flash flood and severe weather event swept through the Northeast. Millions of people in D.C., Philly, New York, New Jersey faced torrential rain. It caused widespread road closures, huge numbers of flight delays, and dozens of water rescues were needed. Meteorologists were quick to link the intensity of it to climate change, that kind of volatility becoming more common.
Even flying itself seems to be getting rougher. There was that Delta flight incident.
Right. A flight from Salt Lake City heading to Amsterdam hits severe extreme turbulence on July 31st. At least 25 passengers and crew members were injured.
Was it storm-related?
Apparently not. Aviation experts are pointing to what's called clear air turbulence. You can't see it on radar. And they're saying that warming atmospheric conditions linked to climate change are likely making this kind of invisible turbulence more frequent and harder to predict. It definitely raises questions about how prepared the airline industry is.
Okay, but amidst the challenging environmental news, there was a significant positive development regarding emissions.
Yes, absolutely. A new study came out, published in July by the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, CREA. It showed that China's carbon emissions actually declined in the 12 months leading up to May 2025. And this was even while their overall energy demand went up.
Wow, that's a big deal, a drop in China's emissions.
It really is. It's a rare reversal of the global trend. The study credits specific policy interventions by Beijing and, crucially, a massive expansion of clean energy sources, solar, wind. Environmental groups were obviously thrilled. Some analysts did caution, let's watch out for seasonal dips or economic slowdowns affecting the numbers long term. But still, very positive news.
But then, on the flip side, a setback for monitoring those kinds of emissions.
Unfortunately, yes. The Methanesat satellite mission was officially declared lost in early July. It had suffered a power failure back in June.
And why was Methanesat important?
It was specifically designed to monitor global methane emissions. Methane's a really potent greenhouse gas, so tracking it accurately is vital for holding countries to their climate promises. Its failure is a blow to those monitoring capabilities. It really highlights the need for backup systems, for redundancy in our climate observation network.
And another environmental worry spot, deforestation in Colombia's Amazon.
Yeah, reports on July 31st confirmed that recent gains in curbing deforestation there have unfortunately been reversed. There was a big surge in tree loss reported for the previous year. Activists on the ground are blaming organized crime groups involved in illegal logging and clearances for cattle ranching. Colombian policymakers warned about the potentially irreversible climate impacts, and local indigenous groups are really mobilizing, trying to protect the rainforest.
Okay, let's shift from earthbound issues to outer space for a moment. A new interstellar visitor was spotted.
This is really cool science news, yes.
Right.
On July 1st, astronomers using the ATLAS survey program detected an object named 3I Alice. It's only the third confirmed object ever detected that originated from outside our solar system and is just passing through.
Third ever, like Oumuamua.
Exactly. Following in the footsteps of Oumuamua and Borisov, these visitors are incredibly rare, and they give us amazing insights into what stuff exists between the stars, interstellar matter. Scientists are calling it a milestone discovery, and it's definitely adding fuel to calls for more funding for detection systems, maybe even missions to try and intercept one someday.
Fascinating. And speaking of bringing things back, there's that company planning to revive the MOA.
Yes, Colossal Biosciences. They announced on July 8th their ambitious plan to resurrect the MOA. That's the giant flightless bird that went extinct in New Zealand over 600 years ago.
How would they even do that?
Using advanced genetic technologies, primarily CRISPR gene editing, combined with related techniques. It's part of the whole de-extinction movement. Supporters argue, it could help restore lost biodiversity, maybe even fix damaged ecosystems. But critics raise huge red flags.
Ethical concerns.
Huge ethical concerns, yeah, and ecological ones, too. What are the unintended consequences of reintroducing a species into an environment that's changed drastically? It's a really complex debate with no easy answers.
Definitely something to watch. Okay, let's wrap up the science section with some medical news. A potential breakthrough on HIV.
Yes, very hopeful news reported on July 31st. Research teams announced significant advances in developing an HIV vaccine. Early study results showed some really promising markers for immunity. Researchers describe it as opening up entirely new pathways towards potentially creating a truly successful vaccine.
That would be incredible, but still early days.
Still early days, absolutely. Public health officials were careful to caution that many more trials are needed, but it's significant enough that you might see a real shift in research funding and focus because of these findings. A lot of excitement there.
And one final health item, this one a bit more concerning, about microplastics.
Yeah, this one definitely makes you pause. A study published on July 31st in the journal PLOS1 suggested that people might be breathing in vastly more microplastics than we thought.
How much more?
Potentially 100 times more tiny lung-penetrating plastic particles than previous estimates indicated.
Wow. What are the potential health effects?
The researchers warned about links to respiratory problems, inflammation, potentially other long-term issues we don't even know about yet. It prompted immediate calls for a lot more research into the health impacts and, potentially, for regulatory action to try and curb microplastic pollution at the source.
Phew. Okay, that was quite a journey through just one day. July 31st, 2025. Tariffs, markets, conflicts, climate events, scientific leaps. It's amazing how much can converge.
It really is. And it just underscores that point, doesn't it? Nothing happens in isolation. You see the economic policy shifts affecting markets, geopolitical tensions flaring up, environmental pressures becoming more obvious. They're all constantly interacting, this complex web of cause and effect, shaping our world in real time.
And that's precisely why we tried to do these deep dives, to help you see those connections, get that clearer picture, those aha moments maybe, so you can feel genuinely informed about all this complexity without just feeling buried by the headlines.
And looking at all this together, it really does raise a fundamental question for all of us, doesn't it? How do we as individuals, as societies, globally manage this constant balancing act between the immediate economic pressures, the geopolitical realities, and then the crucial long-term needs of planetary health and scientific progress?
That is a powerful thought to leave things on, a challenge for sure. We really hope this deep dive gave you plenty to think about, maybe spark some curiosity to dig into some of these areas further. Thanks so much for joining us on this exploration. We'll be back soon with another deep dive.